Forum on Federalism, and this is our fourth session. And while the first session was unfortunately interrupted due to internet issues, and we keep talking about instability in Pakistan, I guess the internet is reflective of that and symbolic of that. But we have an amazing panel lined up today. We're talking about the legacy of the 18th Amendment. And as we know, the 18th Amendment was a radical document, a radical piece of legislation. A lot of work went into it, 10 months of meetings across all party lines. And there was consensus not just on the document itself. I mean, it changed 1/3 of the Constitution, but there was also consensus on the radical nature of the document, devolving powers to the provinces as well. We have a power-packed lineup talking about this issue, the legacy of the 18th Amendment. And I think one of the key questions that I'd like our esteemed panelists to be answering is whether, I mean, the 18th Amendment was meant to resolve contentions between the center and the provinces, and yet it still remains contentious and debated. We have Shahid Khaqan Abbasi Saab representing PMLN. He is a former Prime Minister of Pakistan. We have Fawad Chaudhry, who represents PTI and is a Federal Minister of Science and Technology. We have Dr. Nafisa Shah, who is representing the Pakistan People's Party. He's also a member of the National Assembly. And we have Faisal Sabzwari, who's a former opposition leader in the Sindh Assembly and representing M2M Pakistan. I'm very grateful that you've all made time to talk about this really important issue. And this is an issue that doesn't keep dying. It's been 2010, the 18th Amendment was passed, and yet it's still contentious. I'd like to begin with you, Shahid Khaqan Abbasi. I mean, why is it still so contentious, so controversial, even though at the time we keep talking about political consensus, we keep talking about legislation, and yet the 18th Amendment is still controversial?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. To me, it's not controversial, but to many people, most of whom have not read the 18th Amendment or its effects, consider it to be controversial. And let me just start with the controversy. The controversy really revolves around money, around the NFC award. And basically, the floor that was put there in the NFC award by the 18th Amendment. And I can take a very radical viewpoint and tell you that even if you make the share of the provinces zero in the NFC award, it has a zero impact on the national economy or the national exchequer. So let's start with that. The other thing that people talk about is the reversion to parliamentary democracy and the removal of the semi-presidential system that Pakistan had. So there are many people today who would prefer to go back to those controls that the 18th Amendment had removed. So these are the two issues that are being raised today and debated as controversies. I personally am willing to debate these with anybody who wants to remove or change the NFC award floor, or anybody who wants to go back to a semi-presidential system. The NFC award, we must remember, was the 18th Amendment was a consensus amendment. It took more than 18 months. I think over 100 meetings. And the basis of the 18th Amendment was a Charter of Democracy signed between the two major political parties at that time, the Pakistan People's Party and the PMLN. That laid the foundation for the 18th Amendment. It's a very wide-ranging amendment, and we believe that it took us back to the spirit of the 1973 Constitution, which was also, again, a consensus document. And it truly reflected the intent of the framers of the Constitution at that time. So I think it was a historic effort, and it really gave Pakistan actually a new social contract. So we can debate the controversies all day, but the reality is very different.
Thank you so much, Shahid Khaqan Abbasi Saab. I mean, the fact that it's a consensus document, and that is actually the key, where we even now, within the current political context, we keep talking about political consensus, and yet a consensus that was reached, 10 years ago. And I'd like to turn to Fawad Chaudhry Sahab, if he is online. I can't see if he's online yet, but to talk about the merits and the demerits, because that is what the debate is or should be, not whether the 18th Amendment is not, why it is not working for us. Let's just frame it that way. I'm not sure whether he's online. I'll just turn to Dr. Nafisa Shah Saiba. I mean, the Pakistan People's Party, rightfully so, obviously takes ownership of the 18th Amendment. But there is space for improvement. I mean, for instance, if we talk about the fact that the powers haven't been devolved, we talk about resource allocation, it hasn't trickled down to the district and the UC level. If we talk about the fact that perhaps the provinces may not have had the capacity, weren't ready.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum everyone. Thank you Tadlab and Amber for giving me this opportunity to be here in this virtual forum and debating a very, very important issue. I want to first take you back to the time and the perspective, the historical perspective in which the 18th Amendment came into being. Let us recount that the government that followed General Musharraf's long dark rule was a democratic one. It came as a result of democratic struggles, a vibrant lawyers movement, and of course we had Shaheed Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto's shahadat, that very unfortunate incident which clouded the whole scene. The constitution that the new democratic inherited was tainted by years of military rule, which was then validated through 17th Amendment. And that again, we had a hybrid constitution. It was neither a parliamentary form nor a presidential form. In fact, it was a quasi-presidential form. The 18th Amendment totally rewrote the constitution of Pakistan. And tried on the one hand to restore the 1973 constitution and the 1973 constitution's two very sacred principles on which the 1973 constitution was based on was number one, parliamentary democracy, and number two, federalism. And that, of course, is evidenced by the institution of the Senate that came into being. And these were the two things that the Constitution restored. The parliamentary democracy took away the extra powers from the president, restored powers to the parliament and to the prime minister. And then, of course, the concept of federalism was strengthened through various ways, through a commitment that the NFC award will be progressive, sorry, there's an echo. And then, of course, the resource sharing, there were changing of names, which in itself was also important. Resource sharing and the commitment that the resources that were in the provinces, the first right of use for those resources would be with the provinces. So it was a very important document, and it restored the two, what I consider sacred political principles that that Pakistan's founders committed to the people, and that subsequently all popular Democrats have committed, which is the federalism and the parliamentary democracy. Of course, that clause which gave powers to the presidents to dismiss the parliament at will was also taken away. The other thing that it did was that it gave the first time powers of appointment to the parliament. The judicial appointments, the powers came to the parliament. Subsequently, of course, an activist judiciary overturned that. That is again a work in progress. And it also, of course, strengthened the fundamental rights. But having said all this, I will take your comments and say that the 18th Amendment, while it revised or corrected historical wrongs that were done to the Constitution of Pakistan, I think there is a need to sit together, especially where the contentious issues are. And these contentious issues are not just from the point of view of the federation, saying that, you know, their finances are appropriated by the provinces, but there are problems that the provinces have with the federation as well. And the institution of CCI, one of the most important constitutional institutions, which in the 18th Amendment envisaged that all the issues concerning the federal legislative list 2 and any other disputes that the provinces and the federation, the federal government may have, will be resolved through consensus through the CCI. Unfortunately, we are not, neither the federal government places very little emphasis on this important institution, and all other issues, all issues that concern the federal government, whether it's about resources, whether it's about any violations on either end. There are plenty of violations by the federal government. For instance, today, the federal government collects the federal excise duty on petroleum products. This is not in the divisible pool. They've collected more than ₹1 trillion, and this tax is not being shared with the provinces. So the provinces have their own grievances as well. But these issues, as I said, this is a work in progress. These are the bottlenecks, any other issues coming out of the 18th Amendment. You have the CCI, including the issue of, say, the provincial commissions, the provinces further devolving power and authority and resources to the districts. All these things must be debated, discussed, and this, I think the CCI is a good forum for that.
Thank you. The CCI is a good forum, and I think it keeps coming back to the money, doesn't it? Faisal Sazwari, I'm going to turn to you now, because it isn't just about the center versus the provinces. It's also devolving it down to the district level. I mean, MQM has taken a very strong stance on local bodies and how cities are run and where the money should come from. So your take on it, I mean, how do we move on now? I mean, the controversy is there, but the question really is, what needs to be fixed? What isn't working?
Thank you very much, Amber and Tabadla and Musharraf, everyone. I believe it is oversimplification of a very complex problem if we say that the after effects of 18th Amendment, it is evolving. It's been almost 11 years now. What we have learned through the results of 18th Amendment are not very much, I would say that, encouraging. Yes, the aims were great. All the talk was great. But when it came to implementation, as far as the provinces are concerned, yes, they are happy. They have all the resources, they have all the authority, but where is the responsibility? You see, the spirit of the 18th Amendment, and I'm sitting here as a disgruntled voter on 18th Amendment. Yes, we debated that. Yes, we voted for that. Right now, I have several questions. What was the aim? It was said, and it has been repeatedly said, that the aim was to devolve powers to the common man, not to the provinces. Yes, we were unhappy with the role of Islamabad at that time, all the provinces. But now we have 4 more Islamabads, and it is very difficult to deal with them. Provinces have the resources and the authorities, but they have been lacking where the responsibility comes. Let me share an example of my province, the province of Sindh. On GST on services, we were having a share from the federal government at that time, because at that time federal government used to collect that and send it back to the province, almost 7 billion in 2009. Right now it is almost 230 billion. And where is it coming from? Almost 99% is being collected from Karachi. Is the government spending it there? No, unfortunately not. So the claim to fame of Sindh's province had been in NFC when it was debated that we need more because we generate more. But when the city of Karachi claims the same, the provincial government becomes indifferent. There is a deafening silence when I speak about the legitimacy of that spending and expenditures. So there has to be some. You see, people are least bothered that what was promised. People are bothered about the results. What are they getting right now? We say that founding fathers dreamt that. It can be debated. Was Mr. Jinnah centrist? Was there some politics going on when it came to the provinces of Bengal and Punjab because the UP thought otherwise, and so on and so forth. And you see, it is not prophetic. Like if Mr. Zulfiqar Ali Bhutto, soon after he passed 1973 constitution, there were several amendments. And 18th Amendment is an amendment to Zulfiqar Ali Bhutto's constitution. Islamabad High Court, great, taking away the presidential powers to abolish the assembly and etc. Yes, great. Giving provinces some 17 divisions, okay, fine. But provinces need to be questioned on merit. It is not a matter of becoming a champion of so-called federalism and democracy and not giving anything to your people. It will not work. It is not working. It cannot work like that.
It is not working, and it can't work like that. I hope Fawad Chaudhry Saab has joined the conversation, because I think this is a question I'd like to take to him, because he's obviously talked a lot about the 18th Amendment and what needs to happen and the devolution of powers. I think the idea really, if we talk about, we know that the 18th Amendment was meant to take our structure of governance to its foundational values, and the idea was to take away elite capture from the center. We see it as a center of elitism, in a sense, to the province and down to the local level. Fawad Chaudhry Saab, if you can hear me, if you've joined the conversation, my question would be then to you. What needs to happen in order for us to take the power, give the power back to the people, and not just to remain stuck at the provinces, as Faisal Sabzwari pointed out?
Oh, well, first, obviously, I would like to thank you for taking up this issue. I think probably this is the most fundamental issue with Pakistan's governance structure, and the debate on this issue was totally lacking. I'm very happy that you guys have initiated this debate, and to me, this debate is actually a backbone of all the governance problems that we are facing. So actually, the story starts from the Local Government Act Ordinance 2001. Pervez Musharraf Sahab brought a very vibrant local government system in 2001. But he committed a huge mistake. What he did was that he devolved all provincial powers to the districts. But what he failed to do was that he failed to devolve federations or federal government's power to provinces. 18th Amendment actually did a leap forward in this regard. What they did was they devolved the federal powers to the provinces, but then a disaster happened, and that was the abolition of local government system. And the system, the very vibrant system that Musharraf Sahab introduced, were actually scrapped after the 18th Amendment. So this resulted into a huge anomaly. So what happened was, there is a huge difference in the rules of business of federal government and provincial government. In federal government, the federal ministers are fairly powerful. For example, the bureaucracy, they cannot communicate to the prime minister without minister. Every summary that you send to prime minister or the cabinet has to be seen and approved by the federal minister. This luxury is not available to the provincial ministers. So the provincial bureaucracy actually acts through the chief secretary. And so what happened in the result of this scrapping was that the chief minister and chief secretary, they become hub of all the powers. There is no provincial cabinet. Provincial cabinet is only a dummy cabinet. The local governments were scrapped, and it actually resulted into a catastrophe where we see that billions and billions of, not actually billions, actually trillions were, an NFC award obviously brought this huge disparity where the 60% of the total federal collections will go to provinces. But then what then happened was that the chief minister and the chief secretary, they become custodian of those trillions of rupees. They become custodian of all the administrative powers, and they refuse to share it with their cabinet and with the districts. So this resulted, the classic example is actually Karachi and Ghotki. Karachi provides a huge resource, not only to the Sindh government, but also to Pakistan. But Karachi's development budget is actually negligible. Ghotki, in the name of Ghotki, Sindh gets billions of rupees from the federal government in gas charges, etc. But you can see what is going on in Ghotki. Ghotki gets nothing actually. And likewise in Karak, in KP, for example. So the only way that is now left with the MPs is that they have to flatter chief minister. So if you are not in good books of the chief minister, you are actually nobody. So your district and your people will suffer because your relationship with the chief minister's house is bad. So they not only post 18th amendment, what the huge blunder was committed by the federal government was that not only they transferred the major resources to the provinces, but also if all the systems of accountability on the chief minister's performance was actually was taken away. So now when we call the country, or you say that the government, it's actually the 4 chief ministers and the 4 chief secretaries. The Prime Minister of Pakistan has a very little say in the whole system. For example, if you are dropping your child to the school, it's provincial government issue. On the road on which you are traveling, it's a provincial government issue. If you are, if you need to approach police and there is no police, and the police is not cooperating with you, again a provincial government issue. If the doctor is not available, provincial government issue. So all security is provincial government issue. So you name it, services, you name it, and everything is actually falls on the provinces. And there is no provincial government, because provincial government is the name of only chief minister and chief secretary. There is no third person involved therein. So this was actually a huge anomaly that has been created by the 18th Amendment. So on one hand, 18th Amendment did actually a very positive thing by devolution, by devolving federal subjects to the provincial government, but taking away or not to comply with Article 140A of the Constitution created this anomaly. And on the other part, the 18th Amendment created a huge coordination crisis in Pakistan. For example, it's been, I think, 4 years now that we have not been able to come up with the single standards in Pakistan. Article 152 of the Constitution declares Pakistan as a single market. So if something lands in Karachi, we cannot stop its sale in Peshawar. But the provinces came up with their own standards. So, for example, Red Bull company, Punjab, for example, told Red Bull that you should have a label in Urdu. So the whole Red Bull company is now in a chaos that what to do. How can they print a label in Urdu for one province? Likewise, for example, that all these masala companies, the Sindh government directed them that you should actually have a Sindhi, for example, packing. But the multinationals, they cannot comply with this requirement because this is very, very problematic for them. And also there are other problems where, the Punjab government came up with a totally different milk standards from the rest of the provinces. So the companies are suffering. And as another example of this crisis of the coordination you witnessed is during this COVID, when Sindh government had a total different policy, the federal government had different policy, all the 4 provinces had different policy, and there was no coordination. But thank God, then we came up with this idea of NCOC, and all the provinces could sit together, and then a policy was framed. Another huge crisis that we faced was of the wheat crisis. Sindh government, despite directions from the federal government, failed to purchase a single kilogram of wheat. So and this led to a crisis in the wheat procurement. And later on, when the federal government directed Sindh government that you should release the wheat, they failed to release the wheat, and this created a crisis in the whole of Sindh. Even now, the wheat in Karachi is expensive than the wheat in Lahore. So this coordination, another, the crisis that we experienced because of this miscoordination is the decline of higher education. The higher education standards actually suffered big time because of this. Every province had its own policy, and obviously universities cropped up like we did not see this before. And the quality of the education actually went down, it literally dipped down. So I think moving forward, we obviously need to review 18th Amendment. We obviously need to review NFC. And for example, right now, what is the situation? Situation is that federal government earns about 6,000 billion rupees a year in collection, or maybe 7,000. So 3,500 to 3,800 billion rupees, we straight away goes to provinces. The rest, 300,000 goes into this interest of the loans, and then we have 1,800 billion rupees goes into the defense budget. So federal governments, the whole budget planning of federal government is nothing but actually that how to manage debt, where to get the debt and how to manage that. That's it. This is the whole budget policy of the federal government. So but this, the loans that we have taken, the mega projects that we have taken are actually implemented in the provinces. So we have to link NFC award with the provincial, with the provincial governments. Right now, the biggest sufferer is actually Punjab. Under Article 158 of the Constitution, Shahid Khan Awasisa will not agree with me, but only to bargain the third term prime ministership of Mr. Nawaz Sharif, they actually, I would say, the way they sacrifice the interests of Punjab is unimaginable. Now today, the whole subsidy of wheat is only paid by Punjab. Punjab is taking the brunt of all the 3 provinces where the recovery of electricity bills is negligible. So it's only the Punjab that is paying the bill. Punjab is only paying the subsidy on the wheat. And when it comes to gas, Sindh and KP says, no, it's our right, and we will. So Punjab's industry is suffering. Punjab, as far as this consumers are concerned, they are in a huge, I would say, turmoil. So there is I have no doubts in my mind that 18th Amendment needs a very serious reconsideration. A vibrant local government is one answer to many of our problems. Provincial Finance Commission Award. Supreme Court loves to take suo moto of every other issue, but I am totally unable to understand that why the case of local government is not being heard for like 4 years. So Provincial Finance Award is not implemented. Article 140A is not implemented. Article 158 is in total, I would say it's totally anti-Punjab right now. And obviously, we need to revive this 63 amendments that we brought through 18th Amendment, at least 1/3 of them needs a serious review. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a very comprehensive sort of critique or post-mortem of what needs to be done. And I know that Shahid Khaqan Abbasi Saab started with the money. We'll go back to the money as well. I mean, for instance, I think Fawad raised the question of gas supply to industries in Punjab. You were petroleum minister as well. This is an issue that you were also concerned with. Do you think the NFC award, for instance, the mechanism of coordination that Fawad Chaudhry was talking about, there is the Council of Common Interest that is also meant for coordination. How can we resolve these issues without, and because this is not a show, we want this to be a serious debate, a debate that you don't find either in Parliament at the moment or on television shows. But let's talk about solving this. How do we resolve this?
The issues that my friend Mr. Fawad Chaudhry has raised are real issues. I don't deny that. And they've been around for some time, and they will probably be around for in the future also. But the reality is that they have nothing to do with the 18th Amendment. And there are solutions today available to the government, which we tried to implement in our government, which the provinces at that time did not agree to, are available today to resolve these problems of gas and power and the circular debt. So if they're looking for a solution, the solutions are there. My only thing about the 18th Amendment is that it's a very wide-ranging change in the Constitution. So if today we believe that some of those changes have to be reversed, I think a parliamentary committee can be formed. The Constitution is a live document. It needs changes from time to time. And a parliamentary committee can be formed, and it can examine the views of every party and resolve them. But what I would emphasize is what the federal minister also mentioned are the economic issues that are associated with the Constitution. And again, I say none of them are impacted by the 18th Amendment in an adverse way. In fact, the 18th Amendment gave you solutions to some of those problems. The solutions are available. So if my friend Mr. Fawad Chaudhry can bring an objective debate in the parliament, I'm sure he will find solutions. And he doesn't have to do that if he just looks at the CCI meetings, the last 3 CCI meetings that the government had, and if he looks at the viewpoints we had expressed there and the solutions we had presented. The solutions that have been given there, which were opposed by the PTI government in KP and also my sister Nafisa Shah's government in Sindh. The solutions are there. These solutions are within the ambit of the 18th Amendment. They are totally constitutional. They do not infringe on the rights of the provinces. In fact, what has happened with the 18th Amendment is that while the provinces were given rights, they abdicated the responsibilities to the federation. So I think it's time for the provinces to take over their responsibilities also under the Constitution, especially the amendments of the 18th Amendment.
Could you sort of explain that a little more in terms of the solutions that you believe were rejected, but perhaps are still workable?
Yes, two very simple solutions. Break up the SUI companies, give each province a SUI company. The SUI Southern gives gas to Sindh and Balochistan. SUI Northern distributes gas in Punjab and KP. So we had made a plan, which took 2 years to break up these companies and have a provincial company, and that provincial company would be handed over to the province. So the province is now responsible for distributing gas in its province and setting the pricing also. Under 158, I think the 2158, whatever the ones that deal with gas, the 2 constitutional amendments, One in the 18th Amendment, one was the original act of the original part of the Constitution. Hand over the gas of that province also to the province. So now they have become actual owners of the gas in that province, which is the intent of the original Constitution also, which is protected by the 18th Amendment. So now the province ends up with its gas, and it ends up with a distribution company. So now it's responsible for the gas that it owns, and is responsible for distributing the gas to the people of its province and setting the pricing. The same thing with power. The federation provides X amount of power to every disco, give the discos to the provincial governments, let them be responsible for distributing that power in their province and setting the pricing. So the federation is out of the system of distributing power and gas in the provinces. Every province is responsible for itself. So this is
and not having to pay for its liabilities either. I'm going to turn to Dr. Nafisa Shah Saiba, because there's a lot of points that you need to respond to. I mean, I think I'd like to take up the fact that, and Faisal Salzwari has also spoken about this, Fawad Chaudhry has also spoken about this. I'm going to sort of frame it in a slightly different way. And the question again goes back to concentration of power. That is what centralization is. Devolution is meant to give it back to the people. But if it isn't given back to the people, not just in terms of resources, but representation, that we know that this is the agreed formula that works across the country. There's a lot of criticism, even within Sindh as well, in terms of how it was devolved. You could respond to some of these points.
Yes, many important points were raised, and I think all of these merit a detailed discussion. First of all, Faisal Salzwari spoke about Karachi being an aggrieved area and it contributing so much to the federal or the provincial kitty and getting nothing in return. And I think Fawad Chaudhry Saab also had similar arguments. Well, let me begin with my district. I think I'm very, very aggrieved by the federal government. My district contributes huge amount of gas. It's one of the largest gas producing districts of Sindh. My district contributes to the federal kitty. It contributes to the federal economy. What do the people of my district get in return from the federal government? The past 7 years, I don't remember a penny worth of resources of any scheme, large or small, being given to the 25 lakh people of my district. So you see, if you go into this argument, every district contributes in its own way. Some will contribute in terms of exports. My district is the reason behind the largest date export fourth largest date producing district, date producing country is Pakistan, and Khairpur contributes towards that. We contribute towards the exports. There's so many things. Every district is important, is valuable. It contributes, and then it demands returns as well. So it's just not about Karachi. It's about every district. Every district has a grievance story. And for that, we need to sit together. And as I said, the Constitution provides for the Council of Common Interest, and there all the grievances can be discussed. If the federal government has grievances towards the provinces too have grievances against the federal government. And I mentioned about the huge amount of tax that is done as a petroleum levy. It's a petroleum levy. It's not federal excise duty. It's petroleum levy. And that is, again, it's trillions of rupees that is collected. And why isn't it in the federal divisible pool? Why isn't it going towards expenses for schools and hospitals? Why is it just going into the federal kitty? I can ask that question as somebody from the province of Sindh. So these questions are important, and they must be discussed. And they must be discussed openly, and they must be discussed through a constitutional provision of the CCI. So that's one way of taking this forward. The most important national question, I think, today in the country, and that doesn't concern Sindh alone, and that, as Khakan Abbasi Saab said, it is not just about the 18th Amendment, but it is an important national question, and that is the quality, the kind, the system of local governance in Pakistan. That the entire country, whether it's the federal government and the provinces, all of them have to sit and put their heads together on what kind of devolution they envisage in the provinces. I totally disagree that General Musharraf's system was a wonderful system. I think it was an extra constitutional system. It was totally in contradiction. His devolution was totally in contradiction with the constitution. It totally bypassed the federation. I was in Azam at that time, and I used to argue that this system will not last. I was very happy. My district was getting a lot of funds, but I said it will not last because it was not a cadred system, because it was transporting all the provincial mandate to the districts in an extra constitutional way. And of course, lo and behold, it all collapsed under its own weight. We do need a good local government system. We need a strong local government. We need a formula of resource sharing with the districts. I say that, and I'll say that again. And this is not just our entitlements are not just from the provinces to the districts. Our entitlements are also from the federal government. Will Mr. Fawad Chaudhry tell me what has he done for my district in the past 3 years? Can they ignore any district? And wherever, I mean, it's very sad to see how even the federal government distributes schemes politically to its constituents. And despite this whole sort of, proclamation saying that, oh, we will not make any political distribution of schemes or largesse, this is exactly what's happening now. They are giving M&As, they're giving M&As 150 million each. Why don't I get anything for my constituents? Don't give it to me, give it to my people. But you cannot just have your cake and eat it too. Yes, there are outstanding issues of the 18th Amendment. The difficulties that are arising are on both sides of the fence. And these must be debated in the CCI. Why is the Prime Minister shy of bringing together the chief ministers and talking to them openly about these debates, these issues?
But I'm going to insert a question here. I mean, you do acknowledge that there are problems of implementation. If we talk about local bodies in Sindh or local bodies in Punjab even, hasn't failed to deliver. And that is one of the key questions. The idea was to deliver service to the people. If you could talk about, I mean, and if we could sort of, what do you think needs to be improved or reviewed or discussed? What needs to change?
Well, I do think that there is the outstanding issues, and these are just not 18th Amendment. These are governance issues. These need to be openly and freely debated. And somebody talked about how the chief minister is not accountable. Of course, the chief minister is accountable. There is a provincial assembly. And look at the kind of vibrant debates that take place in the provincial assemblies. The MPs do hold the governments to account. There is a very strong opposition in Sindh. There is a strong opposition in Punjab. There is a strong opposition in KP, and there is an equally strong opposition in Balochistan. And they raise all these issues, which is totally their right to do so. And the provincial governments or the provincial cabinet should and must respond to these issues. But these are outstanding governance issues which have to be resolved. And as I said, there are grievances on both sides of the fence. And for this, the constitutional body of CCI has to go forward. But I do say that the most important national question today is on local government. And I may ask why so far have there been no elections in the provinces where the local government system ended before it did in Sindh. I don't want to go into any province right now. I am speaking as a citizen of this country. I think all four provinces and the federal government need to work together and also the CCI. I think that there has to be a common structure of local government. You cannot, for instance, eliminate the union council in one province and have a union council in the other province. You can't have totally different structures. The structure must be the same. You can't have differences in details. So I think the important, and this is where leadership comes in.
Okay,
I'm going to
sort of.
I want to talk about one issue.
Okay,
For
because
me,
I want
it is
to
very
take this
strange
question
that
to
the
Professor Salwari.
federal government plays the victim card all the time. It is the federal government at the end of the day, even if they think there are issues with the 18th Amendment, it is the federal government which is responsible for bringing the whole federation or the country together and resolving these issues. Why do they just scream and and act as
I'm
if
going to
they're
take that.
the
I'm going to
party?
take that question.
They have to show leadership. They have to show leadership, and they have to take these issues forward and resolve
All right,
them.
Professor Salwari, I'd like you to respond to that, because I think there, in terms, we got your point. I mean, in terms of it is the federal government's responsibility. Professor Salwari, if you could respond to that, because I mean, there have been suggestions. Fawad Chaudhry has suggested the Supreme Court perhaps could take a suo moto. Parliamentary Committee, Shahid Khaqan Abbasi, Nafisa Shah Saiba says Council of Common Interests. What is the platform to debate these issues, according to you, then?
Well, coming to your question, Amber, I shuddered when Shahid Saab proposed that the gas companies should be distributed to the provinces, etc. Because I'd read the day when my province's chief executive has the deciding authority that where to provide gas or not. Because unfortunately, after taking trillions through NFC in development portfolio, what have they given? Not even 12 public buses in 12 years regime, 12 years of Pakistan People's Party's government. So here is the question, and again I'd reiterate, I'm not using the very glorifying words for the constitutionalism and federalism. No, I'm talking about the betterment of a common man. Who can compare Karachi with Khairpur? Khairpur, yes, every Khairpur dweller is as respectable as a Karachiite, but one cannot undermine the sacrifices of Karachi. Their share in the national exchequer as well as the province. Leave aside the national exchequer. We are giving the province almost 300 billion this year only, and not even 10% is being redistributed to that very city. And mind you, all of them are local taxes, indirect taxes, or provincial taxes. Shahid Khaqan Saab was Prime Minister. He knows for a fact that cities and districts had an agreement with the federal government in 1998 when octroi zilla tax was abolished. Earlier, districts and cities Karachi used to collect their octroi tax. The then federal government, Mr. Nawaz Sharif, came to the cities and told them that you just abolish it, we'll give you your due share according to the audited accounts of 1998. Now, what happened? In General Musharraf Day, there used to be an account for when Nafisa Shah Saiba was District Nazim, and federal government used to give money through that account. After 18th Amendment, that account is abolished. Now almost 35 billion of Karachi city is resting with the provincial government. Federal government has given Karachi city's share of OZT to the provincial government, and provincial government simply denies. Once I asked Mr. Murad Ali Shah, the Chief Minister of Sindh, that criticized federal government a number of times. And mind you, Mr. Nawaz Sharif was Prime Minister at that time, and I asked him, but have they ever usurped any of your money or right or shares? He said, well, there are some delay in payments. I said, but when Mayor of Karachi criticizes you, you just seize their accounts. It cannot work like that. I'm totally confident that. And coming back to that Karachi's share and why do we need a vibrant local government system here? 18th Amendment has Article 148. Have the champions of democracy and 18th Amendment ever tried to implement that Article 140A, which is very much there in 18th Amendment? It says that financial and administrative and political authorities and responsibilities will be distributed and transferred. What kind of authority and responsibility has transferred to every district, be it Khairpur or Karachi? Even the water and sanitation is not with the local governments. Even the roads are not with the local government. Leave aside schools and health and etc. etc. The Chief Minister very proudly is posturing as a mayor and doing mayoral jobs. No, it is not your thing. So I would reiterate that until and unless we start delivering with the parity, with equality, we cannot attain whatever good thoughts we had in our mind when we were framing that amendment, very famous or rather infamous constitutional amendments. Because as I said earlier, I would again say that I am a disgruntled voter. I feel that the hand was played. I was shown that when provinces will be having so much and so resources, the districts and cities will be empowered, etc., etc. But now I'm experiencing an assembly, which I have no qualms in saying that a non-representative assembly when it comes to my district. My city, we are experiencing a government which has all the powers, which has all the money, but which has no sensitivity. They are insensitive when it comes to my issues.
And your grievances, again, I mean, I'm going to, because we have very little time left, there have been a few questions as well. I want closing statements. So consider this your closing statement. How do we resolve these issues? What platform? If clearly there's a review that's needed, at least some thought. 10 years have passed, it's not delivering on a lot of fronts.
Well, certainly two issues. A quick one, at least the courts have the authority to have an oversight. They can define constitution. They did it when Article 63(1)(c) was defined on the dual nationality issue. I am, as a petitioner before Supreme Court of Pakistan on that local government thing, implementation of 140A, they haven't done anything, unfortunately. Second, certainly, Parliament is the forum. Again, I would agree with Shahid Saab and Nafisa Saiba that there has to be a parliamentary debate, but with an open mind. When the political leaders say that 18th Amendment, anything over our can be revisited or terminated or abolished over our dead bodies, no? That attitude cannot work. We need to see the aims and objectives and the results. So yes, Parliament is the forum to have an all-party kind of consensus, to have constitutional amendments. But again, the larger political parties have the greater responsibility. And unfortunately, when it comes to the suffering and misery of people living in districts which are not governed by the government parties in provinces, believe you me, the larger political parties are considered insensitive here.
All right, I mean, that seems to be a constant running theme as well, where a province who is in the federal government matters as much as the provinces, and then further on in the districts as well. Fawad Chaudhry, I'm going to ask you to sort of make a comment, your last closing statements. There's also a question that I'd like to put to you. There's been a lot of questions and debate on this, but Sikandar Vizentos asked, is responding to your comments. He said, according to you, the problems arising from the 18th minister, he says that these problems existed before this amendment as well. Could you sort of answer that, respond to that, and consider this your closing statement as well? Fawad Chaudhry Saab. All right, we'll move on. I'm going to go back to Nafisa Shah Saiba. I believe she has to go to the airport. So closing statement, we've reached some sort of consensus that where this review needs to be held. If you could just give your closing statement on this.
See, I think that the 18th Amendment today, if we have a continuous democracy in Pakistan, it's the 12th or the 13th year, there's democracy. It's largely because of the constitutional changes by the 18th Amendment, which restored the original structure envisaged for Pakistan, a parliamentary democracy and the federation. The issue that is being debated is the issue of local governance. As I said, that's an important national question. It's an important provincial question. And for that, there are constitutional forums. There are difficulties on both sides of the fence related to governance issues. There are constitutional forums where such issues can be debated and resolved. And I think the national government should show federal government should show leadership, bring all the provinces together and resolve these issues amicably.
Thank you so much. Shahid Khaqan Abbasi Saab, if you could make your closing statements. I mean, I'm not sure whether we've entirely reached some kind of consensus, but I think that we do know that something is not working. That needs to be identified and fixed.
Thank you very much. With due respect to Sabzwari Saab and the learned Minister for Science and Technology, the issue is not the 18th Amendment or the Constitution today. The issue is implementing the Constitution. The issue is finding solutions to problems. The solutions are there. They're very obvious. But you have to have the understanding of the problem and the will to implement the solutions. I don't see that today. What Sabzwari Saab said is absolutely correct. There are issues in Karachi, issues between the local government in Karachi and the federal government, issues between the local government in Karachi and the provincial government. Local government also itself has to blame for many of the ills of Karachi, but we need to find solutions to the ills of Karachi. And those solutions do not lie, those problems do not lie in the 18th Amendment. They lie in the implementation of the rights and the responsibilities given under the 18th Amendment. For example, I just mentioned gas. I just mentioned power. So, what is stopping the government today from implementing them? So there need to be consensus on implementation of these solutions. The biggest crisis today in Pakistan today is your circular debt. It's 2 billion plus rupees a day. It's not a small problem. Nobody's addressing it. It's mushrooming. Nobody's even aware of it. Today, all your discos are under financial stress. Both your SUI companies are under serious financial stress. Your federal government is under serious financial stress. How will you manage the country? So we have to look for solutions. The solutions lie in debate. The solutions lie in achieving a consensus. If the parliament is today a forum for abusing each other, then you will not find solutions. So the whole problem today lies with the federal government. The Prime Minister has to show leadership. He has to be a person that unites the country and not divides it. There are a lot of divisions in this country. They're very obvious. There are political divisions, there are ethnic divisions, there are sectarian divisions. The job of the federal government, of the federation, of the Prime Minister is to unite everybody. That is not happening. The federal government is a divisive entity today. We need to understand that. Once you understand that, once you try to fix it, the other solutions on the ground to practical issues are available. They can be implemented. But a political consensus has to be reached. The 18th Amendment, a political consensus was reached. It's a formidable change in the Constitution. It's not an ordinary change, but a consensus was achieved. Everything is possible once you put a mind to it, and the will is there to do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Closing statement from Fawad Chaudhry, if you're still online and if you're still with us, because I think these are questions perhaps the federal government today can answer, the party in power.
You won't find scientific solutions to this.
Well, I believe it's a political issue, and Fawad Chaudhry has left the meeting and perhaps maybe solving some scientific problems. But a huge thanks to Fawad Chaudhry, Shahid Khaqan Abbasi, Nafisa Shah, Faisal Sabzwari for joining. We did at least I feel like I think one of the things, the consensus that we could potentially have reached is that right now we really need to think about local bodies much more seriously and outside of partisan politics than we have. And there are forums available within the Constitution and
Can I make one comment on the local bodies?
Last comment.
Okay, local bodies in Pakistan will not work because there's a natural conflict between the provincial government and the local bodies. There's a natural conflict between the MNAs and the local bodies. You have to fix that conflict first before you talk about local bodies.
But that's a question as well, where the 18th Amendment was meant to remove some conflicts and it's created others. And I'm hoping that with these series of conversations that we're having on the Forum on Federalism today, we're seeking to find some answers and perhaps more ideas and creative ideas. Thank you very much for watching, all of you. We have another great session coming up after this. It's on global perspectives of centralization versus federalism, devolution. Stay tuned. We'll be obviously updating our social media handles on when